Hello, everybody. It is your favorite unfiltered book reviewer and the lady who always has champagne handy. Little Miss Dimples is here, your kind hostess of today's podcast. And today I'm going to be talking about Crush by Tracy Wolff, the second book in the Crave series. I know I haven't done a first one for it, but I am going to go just like over a brief summary for some of you who are new or who are interested into getting this series. I'm going to definitely be talking about it. And for those of you who have followed my Bookstagram, you know that I love posting more in-depth book reviews. So I'll be doing this for the second book of the Crave series, just because I honestly didn't know I was going to be ending up having to do in-depth book reviews. So we are all surprised here. So as I keep going ahead on this journey of the baddie gargoyle queen and powerful hot vampires, all I want to say is warning, there is spoilers ahead. So if you haven't read Crave or Crush by Tracy Wolff, then I seriously suggest you go read it because why not? Why not? I mean, I love me some dark romance. And even though I didn't know this was a young adult series, and I didn't even know it was a series, I thought this was a standalone novel. I'm getting into it, and yeah, let's go. Alrighty. So overall feeling, honestly, I put it a 3.5 out of 5-star rating. Just because I think that Crush was like a good sequel to Crave. Action and plot wise, there was so much to take in. Life, death, the stakes were high. Oh my goodness, the stakes were high. I know I mentioned for Crave that it is definitely a more modern take on Twilight, and Miss Wolf did an amazing job of shutting me up on that because it is nowhere near the Twilight League. And I'm not saying Twilight is bad because for those of you who know me, you know I will watch Twilight on repeat on rainy days, especially. But Crush stood out to me because it brought in a morally gray character. Maybe I should say to readers that they have the privilege of having two main morally gray characters as leads. So, in a way, it doesn't make the love triangle that follows so direct and decisive to choose from like the main protagonist, our main protagonist, Grace Foster. That being said, I loved the new character of Hudson, but it left me feeling really underwhelmed with Jackson and Grace. So I left the plot twist that came towards the end more predictable and kind of, I hate to say it, but it was kind of sad to watch. I really loved and fell in love. Excuse me, words. I really loved Jackson Vega's character in Crave, but Hudson definitely took over that spotlight in this book. Side plots included. They were interesting, but some just came out of nowhere. I'm kind of invested just because I know that the series will be ending this year on May 2023. So we'll see how the progress goes because these books are over 600 pages. And when you're an adult with full time responsibilities, young adult fiction could wait. I will admit that while I devoured Crave, the first book, like I went through it within a week, maybe it was maybe probably less, like back in January. I consumed that book. But Crush was a little bit harder to get through for me. Like Wolf's styles of writing and diction had consistent problems thrown at Grace at on top of a soon-to-be love triangle. It felt very much like something bigger in development in this book, but it's all the mini problems that add up to something that I could only grasp so much just from the second book. Part of me wishes this was a bit more spaced out, but I'm fascinated to see what else is going to happen to Grace, Hudson, and Jackson. That being said, I'm going to get into character development and I'm going to start with the main trio. But first, let's start with Jackson. Like I said before, with Jackson Vega, oh my goodness. I felt kind of sad that he got left out. Like really sad. It felt like he was really trying to pull his way to meet Grace more than halfway. And I remember just falling in love with his dark and powerful persona that eventually let go. He went from this calm, intimidating, reserved person to someone who could be a little bit more trusting towards the world. So when I was reading and finding out that Jackson was barely in this book overall, I appreciated the moments that he was there for Grace. He set up the whole library date, which was one of the few moments as readers that Grace got with Jackson. I just, I love a library date and I love tacos, like very plain tacos, but still, I love tacos. Like, if you're setting up a date in the library already, okay, all right, you get something else from me later on. But I didn't agree with the lack of Jackson in this book. But I hope to get more answers of what Jackson will eventually represent for the series. He is someone who is handsome, powerful, and sweet for the most part, a tortured soul for sure. But I can't help but hope for the best for him. Like, honestly, I better have a freaking happy ending for him. Like, come on now. Jackson was built up so much for readers in Crave, and I just hope that like Wolf doesn't take that away from us as readers. Because if that's the case, why should we have started out with Jackson? Like, why? I really thought he was the main character, and I'm curious to see where his character goes from here. Grace and Jackson did have a mating bond in Crave, and clearly they were trying to work through it and crush. But I just hope he becomes more than just a side character. He isn't perfect at all, guys. I'm not saying he's perfect at all. Parts of him found him almost to be like too worried for Grace. She is a baddie in her own right, despite what he thinks and his like actions show. I would have really wanted to know how his perspective was during the 4 months when like Grace was frozen as a gargoyle. I know that there was also Flint who had feelings for him, which would make sense. But even then, I feel like there is a story there, and I'm really looking forward to deciphering it more. With Jackson, it's just like I can't admit that I'm a really big fan of him because he has his own backstory of torture, and he's like I mean, he's a prince of vampires, so of course they're gonna have, but he's a prince with very douchebag parents. So, and he's the youngest of him and Hudson. So I just really wish I had more. I so much I want to uncover from this guy. I do. I have so much to uncover, and I have questions for the covet, the next one that I will be getting into. But although I will admit, Jackson, whew, compared to Hudson, oh my goodness, none are the cinnamon roll kind of hero, but Hudson makes Jackson look otherwise. I'm not gonna lie. So let me get into Jackson right now because he has a whole set of notes for me that I want to get into. Whew. Oh Lord, don't mind me fanning myself. Oh Lord, that morally gray hunk of a character, Hudson. God, I hate to say it, but he's grown on me. I don't love him the way I adore Jackson, unfortunately. Yet there is so much fucking mystery that I can't help but love and hate him. He is a complex character, and I love that he has no freaking issue bouncing between the lines of arrogance and caring, hot and cold, especially when it comes down to his own relationship and Grace. And I even quoted some things like, for example, when it was like Grace, Hudson, and Jackson that were talking about like how bad Hudson is and how bad he was when he was alive. And one of my favorite quotes was like someone had quoted, I forgot if it was Grace or Jackson, but he was like they were like, not when the last time he was happy, he was plotting a hostile takeover of half the paranormal world. And then Hudson was like, you wounded me. It was at least 3/4. I was like, this bitch. He's like, if you're gonna insult me, at least do it correctly. I was like, oh my gosh, he's such a sassy guy, and I hate it and I love it at the same time. Well, I will admit, Hudson himself is also tortured. And as someone who's also the eldest child, I know that torture. It's only the torture the first daughter or son gets. But he's more intelligent than what we came across at first as readers. Like, Hudson's first impression for me was this super snarky and annoying guy who just happens to be in Grace's head. But alas, over time, he's still very much snarky and an asshole at times, but he has his like moments of vulnerability. So for that, I could semi appreciate their forced proximity and clearly obvious chemistry. For example, that laundry room scene where he dances with Grace is still one of my favorites in this book. And I quote, Grace, he says, looking deep into my eyes, and for the briefest moment, I see something there that makes me catch my breath and also wonder if I'm imagining it. Yes. He circles his finger again, and the music switches from Flow Rider to the opening lyrics of Walk the Moon, Shut Up and Dan. And it's so clever, so ridiculous, so Hudson that I can't help bursting into laughter right before I decide, screw it, and let him dance me from one end of the laundry room to the other. When the song finally ends, Hudson lets me go and we both stand there grinning at each other. How do you know I love that song? And just that easily, his smile fades away, leaving nothing there but an emptiness so stark that I feel it deep in my chest, even before he answers. So you really remember nothing of the time we spent together. And end quote. Oh my gosh. Oh, he grew on me. He grew on me. I'm not gonna lie. I am curious about these 4 months that they spent together because, from his perspective, towards the end of Crush, he says that Jackson and Grace's mating bond was not even in existence when they were stuck together during those 4 months. I know that this series does have a book solely based on these 4 months, so I'm definitely gonna end up reading that. But I hope I'm getting to read more things from like Jackson's or Hudson's perspectives. I'm just saying, like Grace's perspective is very entertaining and I enjoy reading from her. She's a protagonist that isn't bad at all and I enjoy her a lot. I think, as I said before, she's a baddie in her own right. But Hudson was there to burn the ground for Grace when she suffered the venomous bite from King Cyrus. So, oh my goodness, I could just imagine the scene. I could picture it because it was so vividly described that he like just took apart that whole ludicrous tournament. And so, as Tiffany Pollard from New York once said, I'll be there for him with open arms, open legs, and an open mouth if he ever exists in reality. Just saying. And Grace Foster. I saved her for last because oof, she has a whole other level of chaos and complexity. Overall, I think she is a good main heroine, badass. I will admit, I didn't have patience for her in the beginning, but she did hold her own, and for that, I respect. I am a tad envious of her. I don't care what y'all say. Okay, I know they're a little younger, but I don't care. Okay, they're I'm like, just because she has two of the most powerful and handsome vampires in the world after her, even like, I just, I honestly thought it was a fascinating approach by Wolf to make Grace a gargoyle because it took the readers and Grace alongside a journey that, if I'm being honest, I have not really read about much. Everyone in the fantasy, fantasy, my bad words. Everyone in the fantasy world of literature understands that there are different sublevels of species, right? But gargoyles are not really ones I'm familiar with. So, that being said, I found it interesting that we got to learn what it means to be a gargoyle in this universe. Because when Grace mentioned that all she knew about gargoyles were that gargoyles were the water sprouts and the stone statues were all so familiar with, I could not help but think, same. What I enjoy most about Grace is that she isn't afraid to call out the obvious situations that she's in. For example, being in love with Jackson whilst having his hot older brother and in her perspective, evil at the time, trapped in her head. She hated it at first, but at last I have a feeling that she likes Hudson more than Jackson. After all, on her deathbed, she chose Hudson over Jackson in the end to the point of trusting him to bury her in her own grave for a little bit. Oh my goodness. I was like, this can't be how the freaking series ends. I know there's a lot more books to this, so the fact that this ended up even getting here to the point of death was a little scary. So that was that. I think that one of the most important aspects that Crush emphasized about Grace is that she could hold her own, though, as I said. For example, I don't know if I'm saying this right, so if I'm not saying this right, please forgive me. But during the Ludicrous tournament, just moments of her baby, just moments before that, her mating bond with Jackson was unwillingly torn apart. And oh my god, it was so saddening to read that. I felt really sad for her because heartbreak is a bitch already. But for it to be part of a soulmate attachment and being ripped apart, oh my god, I wanted Cole to suffer so hard. I was like ready. I was ready like for her to rip him to shreds. And I can't even imagine a heartbreak super painful, even in a fictional world. Like, just I imagine that it hurts the same as a first love. It hurts like a motherfucking bitch. Um, Even after all that, and with Hudson's support, she manages to still get up and be out there on her own without either of the boys for like the first time, which I was looking forward to because she didn't have Hudson in her head and she didn't have Jackson protecting her. I mean, she literally fought tooth and nail against some of the most powerful creatures in this universe, quite literally the royalty of dragons, powerful wolves and witches and warlocks. And one of my favorite quotes of hers is, and I quote, "Sometimes life hands you more than a new hand of cards to play. It hands you a whole new deck, maybe a whole new game." End quote. I thought that was insightful of hers, so I couldn't resist including it because, why not? Life can be complete and utter shit sometimes, but once in a while, you just got to deal with it and hope for a whole new and better deck. So that being said, I do have some questions for Covet though. The third book in the series. What is the deal? Okay, towards the end, Crush, big spoiler, we find out that Hudson and Grace are mated. And I was like, what is okay? My question is, what is the deal with that sudden mating bond? Like, I get it, they had chemistry, but that was so quick just to get reattached with someone. I'm like, wait, how could how is that possible for it to just jump real quick from one end to the other? I'm just like, I know Jackson and Grace weren't perfect together. Don't get me wrong. I think Jackson definitely had some not over possessive moments, but he was definitely shielding Grace a lot, and it wasn't letting her grow. But it's just weird. It's a strange fate of fiction, and I don't know whether I love or hate it yet because I thought it was just so convenient to be attached to Hudson. And then the second question I had for Covet is, what is this big plan that Hudson tried to stop Cyrus from completing to the point where he didn't mind killing people and not regretting it? You know? And then last question, third question I have is, where is Jackson's character going from here? Like, are we going to see more of him in Covet that isn't in like a pitiful kind of light, or is in like in a super protective of Grace type of way? Like I said before, I absolutely adored him and I love Hudson. I do. Oh my goodness, Hudson. But that in Crave, Jackson was so much more prominent. And that dancing scene will always get my love when him and Grace were dancing on top of the Northern Lights, or it's not on top, like, by the Northern Lights. It will always be one of my favorites. So I'm hoping I get these questions answered. Please let me know what you think. Comment down below. And thank you so much for listening in. Please be sure to follow my Bookstagram and my website in the link below. So thank you so much for listening and have an amazing life until next time. It is your favorite host, truly, Little Miss Dimples. Goodbye.